And good afternoon. It's Amrita Bradley. I'm the creator of Breaking Boxes, and I have the absolute pleasure today of interviewing an amazing, amazing person who I've had the absolute privilege of spending some time with. I'd like to introduce you to Claire Dunn. She is the founder of Nature's Apprentice. Now, I accidentally sort of came across Claire by accident. I went to the Seven Sisters Festival a little while back and was waiting for another presentation to start and find out what was going on with that. And Claire was on stage, and I was hearing her speak about, her relationship with nature, and I was just absolutely mesmerised and just straight away bought her book. And now I'm not much of a reader. I find sort of, the actual act of sitting and reading kind of boring. So when I say this is one book I couldn't put down, I mean, this is one book I could not put down. I just could not wait to, read Claire's next adventure. And the book I'm actually talking about is My Year Without Matches. If you haven't read it, I'll put a link in the description. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm going to stop talking now and let Claire do something. So Claire, how are you going?
Hi, I'm Rita. That's fun to hear that story of how you came across me. I didn't actually know that. So lovely to hear that synchronicity.
All right, so Claire, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the founder of Nature's Apprentice. So give us a little bit of your backstory.
Well, I certainly wasn't trained in a kind of traditional way. I don't know if you can be trained as a rewilding facilitator. It's really what Tom Brown Jr., the tracker, calls dirt time. Dirt time is actual time on the land, doing the practices. And I had a journalistic background and studied communications and media at university, but then quickly became the subject of the media in my 20s when I was a campaigner for the Wilderness Society and doing lots of political activism around forests and marine ecosystems. And then what I came to realize towards the end of my 20s was I was burning out as an activist and also really deeply questioning the premise of the kind of activism I was doing, because what I saw was that the root cause of all the problems, the ecological crisis, was the profound separation that people experience between themselves and wild nature. So I started diving deeply into the human nature connection and experimented with a range of different modalities like deep ecology and the work that reconnects, and depth psychology, eco-psychology. And as part of that, I found kind of rewilding. It wasn't really coined that at the time, but really just found myself deeply drawn to the practice of earth skills, indigenous wisdom, ancestral life ways that we lived on the land, engaging my hands to a craft, my heart to the land, and understanding at an intellectual level how we got ourselves into this crisis. And so I really turned my focus to this pathway that I found, and ended up spending my year without matches, a year living on retreat in the woods, in the bush, practicing earth skills and really paring life back to the basic essentials. So from that year, everything has kind of opened up in terms of the books that I've written and the inquiry that I'm still on, which is how to live a life that's really deeply connected to our life support systems, deeply connected to place, and to a sense of true belonging on the planet, wherever we are.
So Claire, there's a lot to unpack in what you've just said, but I want to just sort of focus in on, why do we as humans need to connect with nature? I mean, we've got everything we need. We've got our computers and our cars and all this cool stuff. Why do we need to be in nature?
Good question. Well, I'm going to rephrase that question and kind of turn it on its head and say, well, we are nature. There's nothing about us that isn't natural or wild in its essence. So really what I'm encouraging people to do is to reclaim that wild essential part of us. When you think about our ancestry, and 99.9% of all of our ancestors lived intimately with their surroundings, knew what plants to eat, knew what plants were medicines, knew how to make fire, collected water straight from the water source, lived in village life, focused around hunting and gathering. But even more recently than that, living a kind of agrarian lifestyle, which was still much more connected to the land and to a sense of, community. So what I'm really saying is, let's look to what we've lost in our uber civilized, uber domesticated life. So it's really only a kind of pin drop in time that we've been living such a highly technical lifestyle. So really, I'm saying it's our nature to be in touch with wild nature. It's in our nature. It's our birthright. Our nervous systems expect from birth to be embedded in a web of relationships with all of life.
Do you think that a lot of the ill health we suffer, everything from, say, depression, anxiety, cancer, is because we're living out of alignment with the way our bodies were, well, really they're structured to be?
Yeah, I believe that a lot of the mental illnesses and things like, rising rates of obesity, ADHD, etc., like mental health issues in kids, a lot of it is because we've become so divorced from not just nature, but from the kind of village-based lifestyle that our nervous systems thrive on, that our nervous systems expect and know. And we've become so divorced from our food systems, for instance, or our medicines, that I really do feel like we're seeing the results of extreme disconnection from our life support systems.
Yeah, okay. That's a bit concerning. So, okay, so let's say, we no longer live in, sort of tribal, and, even going back just a few decades, it was common to have a multi-generational household. We don't even have that anymore. We're all pretty much living and trying to negotiate, navigate all the stresses of life on our own. Single parents, two people in a household, or just one single family in a household. And it's hard going. And I mean, how many times do you wish that someone would just, bring you over a meal? And that's one of the, the things that I experienced on the retreat that I went on with you. And that was, I had a task, and all I had to worry about for that day was that task. And that may have been, so for example, collecting water. And somebody else or another group would go and make food, and somebody else would tend to the fire. And, it was okay. I didn't have to worry about, collecting food or cooking food, because as long as I took care of the water, I knew that somebody else was going to take care of that part for me. And it was just an incredible experience, just to sort of know, if I put my little bit into the group, somebody else will put their little bit into the group, and then we all benefit. And it was that communal group, that bit where we all thrive, because everybody did a little bit, instead of everyone having to try to do everything and then getting all stressed out and not doing it well and not having enough time, and, they're not eating well, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
We used to run these camps, which we will again, that were like 150 people, including kids, wild by nature village camps, family camps. And I'd watch parents turn up, and they're used to, doing everything and living in a nuclear family bubble. And suddenly, for the next 5 days, they're in a village environment where their kids go off happily all morning with like mixed ages and with mentors, exploring nature. Like the parents get to like have a cup of tea and sit back and actually chat to other parents. Dinner is communally cooked. All the tasks are shared amongst everyone. And at night, dusk comes, the central campfire gets lit. Everyone gathers to share a meal and to share story of the day, is what we call it.
I was hoping you'd get onto stories, Claire, because that was another awesome experience, and I've really taken that learning on board, the learning of stories. But and then I'll ask you to mention some of your favorite storytellers in a moment, but like, just how we learn through story. Actually, no, you take it over from here, Claire. You know a lot more about this than I do. So tell me
Well,
about
I mean, there's our we're all storytellers, because we all have, at least we have our story of the day, which a lot happens in a day, and we need to catch each other's story. And it's like that. It's like a catch each other's story, especially catching each other's story of your interactions with nature. It really helps motivate the ongoing kind of amateur naturalist, like, oh, tell me about the story of your experience with the bird at your letterbox, and I'll tell you about the wombat that I saw last night. Those kinds of stories really start to build up a sense of curiosity and like shared ecological knowledge. But yeah, also what we do on these retreats is bring in the old stories, bring in the myths
love
from
those. They were great.
eons ago. And they tap into people's deep memory of that act of sitting around the fire with a village and hearing the stories. And I've started really apprenticing to stories a lot more, and I've been inspired by Clarissa Pinkola Estes in
Love
Women
her. She's great.
Wolves, and Martin Shaw is a wonderful storyteller, and Michael Mead. There's many storytellers, and I feel like storytelling is having a bit of a renaissance. We realizing that some of the fundamentals of a thriving human life are dancing, sharing stories, sharing time in nature, singing. These things. If we're not dancing, telling stories, and singing, what's going wrong? It's a really valid question.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the experience that I had with storytelling and singing and dancing by a campfire, well, it just unearthed something that maybe, I mean, I'm sure it was always there, but it just, I don't know, maybe it is so buried so deep. And to bring that out was just an amazing experience. But Claire, I want to touch a little bit on your second book, Rewilding for the Urban Soul. So yeah, another great book. But there's a few things in there that really kind of touched me. And I want to touch on for a moment, how you brought community together. So in an urban environment where everybody's generally segregated, everyone's got their own house and their own job and their own life, and how you brought them together through grief rituals and, supporting each other through food. Tell me a little bit about that, because this, again, is so much to unpack. But
well, the Rewilding the Urban Soul project was really about me using all the same, or experimenting with the same kind of rewilding practices or deep nature connection practices, but living in the city, because I lived in Melbourne for 8 years and I wanted to live a wild life still. So I just transferred the question onto that landscape and quickly realized that, yes, there's nature connection, but what the city really begs and asks for is that interweaving of nature and culture. So bringing nature and culture together. And the way we do that is creating opportunities for people to come together in a way that brings nature into the conversation. And creating village lifestyle is actually, it's a rewilding act. It's like relearning village technologies. And they are technologies. How do we build a strong sense of village? What are the ways, what are the mechanisms, what are the technologies that do that? So I was experimenting with, I was living in a share house that shared all our food and shared, dinners and lots of flowing of community in and out of potluck dinners and working bees and, Facebook group that facilitated lots of different types of sharing within a 5-kilometer radius. There was a collection of people that also were interested in sharing dinners and that kind of thing. But also going deeper than that, we held ceremonies or rituals around seasonal changes. So around equinoxes and solstices, we'd gather together in a fire circle down by the river and mark those, because any human on earth sees the seasons change. So it's a universal pan-cultural way of celebrating together and bringing nature and culture together. We also held a 24-hour grief ritual around the time of what they call the Day of the Dead in a kind of Celtic lineage, which is Samhain, around May 1st in the Southern Hemisphere. So we had people coming and going from a sacred fire over 24 hours. We had a altar for the ancestors. People would come and put photos for the ancestors and then share stories or poems or songs or laughter or tears around what they're letting go of, what they're grieving, what's past, what they're mourning. And that was incredibly
So can I
poignant.
just dive into that a little bit deeper? So what are people grieving? I mean, you mentioned the obvious, so people that are passed. What else are people grieving?
Well, I mean, a big part of it is acknowledging eco grief or world grief, because we're all witnessing so much passing, being lost, mass extinction spasms, runaway climate change, loss of our favorite places, our childhood places, loss of forests and ecosystems. So it's certainly inviting in that kind of transpersonal grief or broader grief, but also people bringing their personal grief of loss of loved ones and loss of jobs or relationships or ways of living that
It's so powerful. I can just the words coming out of your mouth right now. I can just I can feel the power of having a really healthy way to deal with grief, because we don't we just suck up our grief? We just cop it on the chin and deal with it, but and
yeah,
what happens to us?
absolutely. And what I've learned is that every earth-based culture had regular grieving rituals. It's like a emotional hygiene for a community,
Yeah,
because
we've lost that,
there's
haven't we?
always grief.
Well,
The more,
I was going to say, I feel like we've lost that.
yeah,
Not all cultures, but certainly, the cultures that I've been involved in. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. People keep their grief private, or when you think about um, memorials that we hold these days, there's not really a space to actually grieve. It's more like keeping up appearances. So acknowledging that living a deep, heartfelt human life, especially in this time of what Joanna Macy calls the Great Turning, it's a life that is pockmarked by grief. And if we move that emotion in community, then we create space for the new. We create space for, creativity, for creative solutions.
Yeah, and I
And
really feel like that's something we need. I've actually stopped pretty much watching the 7 o'clock news, just because, my own personal, I don't know, for my own mental health, I actually can't handle watching any more of how politicians fight and, seeing the environment, and then this tragedy's happened and that tragedy's happened in all different parts of the world. Then really not having, any way to express that other than just to feel, oh man, the world's screwed. What are we doing as humans? And having that grief ritual, having that place to, just release that. And not only myself, so many other people that I speak to feel the same way. They feel the sadness of what's going on, and have no way to release it, no way to cleanse it. So then, we can then focus on what can be done.
Well, it's also acknowledging that we all carry wounds with us. I mean, yes, there's the world grief that we need to move through our bodies, because it shows us our interconnectedness too. I'm grieving on behalf of the polar bears or the mountain pygmy possum, or this place down the road that was so precious to me that's now a car park. It shows us our love for the world by our grief, but also just acknowledging too, we all carry wounds with us. It's part of the texture of being alive, being human. And so helping each other to heal those wounds through moving them, through acknowledging them, through being seen and being witnessed. It's really powerful village building technology. It's a kind of rewilding.
Claire, how can people get started on this process?
Well, I think something that's so important is something that I know as anchors. If you have people in your life that anchor you in what you most cherish, in what is most valuable to you, and you can
Give me
actually,
some examples. What kind of things?
so it's someone, it could be someone older than you, like an elder, someone you really respect, or a friend that you might really feel like is like a spiritual friend. And you can ask each other to anchor each other, which is a sense of, I need to come to you and really share my heart and really be seen and heard in what my experience is. From that, so much can happen. And from that, also ideas like, let's hold a grief ceremony together. Or, hey, I really hear that you're wanting to move into a place of deeper connection to nature. Why don't you go along to this course that's being run, or connect with this group of people who are exploring that similar thing? It needs to start with a community. It's one thing to try and do this alone, but it won't be sustained unless it's anchored by people who are really witnessing you and really caring for you and really see what you most cherish. So maybe a good place to start is to take yourself on a wander, and it might even be in your backyard or in a local park, but not with a sense of I'm trying to exercise or get from A to B, but enter into a landscape without time and without destination. So really with that wandering mind, and ask yourself the question, what really matters to me in this time in my life? And really listen deeply for the answer. And the answer might not just be coming from your own head or psyche. The answer might be mirrored back to you from the landscape, because of course we are embedded in the mind of Gaia, the earth, and the land is also speaking to us. So getting clear on what really makes life pleasurable for me. What do I most value? It's a really powerful question. What do I most value? And you might find that part of the answer might be, I really want to develop a deeper relationship with my people, with my community, with my land. Connection really matters to me. And then the next question is, well, what are the next steps to fostering deeper connection with myself, with the earth, with my community?
Yeah. We're going to talk some more about that later, Claire. We might do a second interview and really delve down into some of this stuff. Claire, tell me a little bit about how this work supports personal empowerment and community development.
I mean, what I witness, and I can only speak from my own experience, when I mentor people in these practices of connection, they think they're just coming for nature connection. And then what starts to happen is their connectivity system starts waking up. So they start connecting to birds, plants, animals, people, places, landscapes, elements. But then what happens from that place, once their connection's getting topped up, then their gifts, their own personal gifts, start waking up. And from that place, they start visioning how they might contribute to the world in a way that feels more aligned to who they really are. That, in a nutshell, is how I see my work connecting to personal and community empowerment.
And when people are empowered, then they're not just weighed down by, the current issues or the issues of the day. They can then feel like they can actually do something about it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, then people start imagining how they can contribute to something other than just their own personal or their own family well-being. And they start really feeling the responsibility as an adult on planet Earth in this time, the responsibility to care for the Earth community, not just their immediate family.
Yeah, and I think that old adage, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we've been so focused on the individual, or the nuclear or the small family unit, whatever, maybe not nuclear, but the small family unit. And we've done that, and if finally we're starting to wake up to the fact that maybe that doesn't work. Maybe we do need to, focus on community. Maybe if we just started changing our mindset around that, if we started thinking bigger picture, if we started thinking as a group and acting like a group. So instead of me just worrying about what I want and what I get and what's in it for me, if I started looking after, somebody else, and then they in turn started looking after me, and then we start to both win, And then we
Mhm.
expand that out from 2 people to a group. And then that group, expands out to a community and so on and so on. Wow. I mean, wouldn't that
Mm.
be an absolute shift in the paradigm? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what they talk about with the tipping point, right? It's like if enough people are switched on or empowered in a certain way or understand themselves in relationship to the world in a certain way, and that keeps spreading, then there's a tipping point where we suddenly have a community of people who are acting in the interests of the earth community and not for personal profit or gain.
Wow, yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. Wouldn't that just be? I mean, and it's doable, I was about to say, wouldn't that be nice? But no, screw that. It's actually doable. We can do this if we actually just started to change our mindset.
Well, I think that's what you're doing right here, Amrita, with this podcast, right? It's like this is your
You're right.
contribution towards that tipping point.
You're right. You're right. This whole, breaking boxes really is all about empowering people just to, in so many different ways. Like it's too large to speak about right now. But yeah.
Absolutely. No, I'm feeling that in you. I feel really inspired by you stepping out and creating this offering of yours.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that, actually.
So there's a quote that's in my Year Without Matches that still speaks to me really strongly. It says, don't ask what the world needs of you. Ask what brings you alive and go do that. Because what the world needs most right now are people who have come alive. And that feels like a really great guideline still. Don't think, what should I do? Follow that path of aliveness. Joseph Campbell calls it following your
Follow your
bliss.
bliss. Yeah. 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 I love
It's
it.
along those lines, but it still remains a kind of guiding principle for me.
Yeah.
And good to keep checking in. Last week I was being filmed by ABC TV for their show Compass on religion and spirituality. And I found myself being filmed by a drone on a paddleboard. And I haven't been on my paddleboard since my son was born a year ago. He was born a year ago this week. And so I was scared I was going to fall off my paddleboard, and this drone was taking a shot of me, and then it was drifting up to the city skyline. And I just thought, I'm still doing what I love. I'm here on my paddleboard at 6 a.m. My son is now a year old and he's playing by the fire with his dad. And I'm still able to get on my paddleboard and cruise down the river and spread the message of rewilding at the same time. And life's good.
Yeah, it isn't that just I think that's the epitome of life, really, when you can work and it doesn't feel like work.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's following your passion. Your passion can be hard work, but it's satisfying. It's that kind of perspiration that's satisfaction.
So, Claire, we'll finish up our interview, but is there anything that you really want people watching this interview to know, or something that will inspire them to live their best life and to empower themselves?
Mm. Well, I feel like you touched in on it, Amrita, when you talked about turning up to that workshop and finding yourself sitting around the fire, hearing stories, weaving a basket in your hands, the stars overhead, and going, hang on, I didn't know that this was missing in my life. That's the sentiment that you were pointing to. Like, wow, this feels good in my body, and I didn't even know I was missing it. That's what I'm encouraging people to explore. What are you missing in your busyness, in your addiction to phones, in the way we spend our lives within four walls? What are you missing? What in our ancestry have we lost? And can you find a way back to remember, what we all need for our thriving, which is why we're here. We need deep connection to ourselves, to our people, and to our wider self, this incredible, mystical earth that we have the privilege of caretaking.
Well, Claire, this has been so deep. I'm going to have to watch this about 3 times over just to really soak in everything that you've said. But I really want to thank you for speaking with me this afternoon. And yeah, so I'm going to pop in Nature's Apprentice website details. Look, there is so much on offer. Have a peruse, maybe have a read of Claire's book. Honestly, My Year Without Matches, you will not be able to put it down. I'll tell you what, there's probably about a good handful of books that I have had that experience with, and that's one of them. So highly recommend that. Claire, is that on audiobook?
I believe so.
Yeah, but I actually sat down and read the paper version with a glass of wine. Yeah, awesome. All right, Claire.
Thanks, Amrita.
Thanks so much for chatting with us today. And yeah, I'll pop all the details of your books and your and your offerings in the chat below. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, bye.
Your voice of freedom, standing out by going in, clear the